Well, all righty, welcome back to another episode of Generation to Generation, Bridging the Gap with Rex
and Eva.
And we are so excited to hang out with you guys. It is Thanksgiving week.
It is Thanksgiving week.
Yeah.
I'm very excited about that. This was an episode topic I came up with, and I'm very excited to talk about it.
Yeah.
Because it's just fun.
It is fun.
We've been talking about really serious stuff, and I think this is serious in a way, but it's fun too. So
it is, because you are absolutely right. There is a serious component to this, but more than not, it's kind of fun.
I think it's relatable. I think people can relate to it.
People are going to relate to this,
especially
in the South, because part of Thanksgiving week is Rivalry Weekend. Did we say that right? Rivalry
Weekend. Once you say that enough times,
when
it
we
doesn't
said
make
it
sense.
together, I thought it was kind of jumbled.
Rivalry Weekend. Rivalry.
Rivalry.
In other words, it means all of your favorite football teams are playing their rivals this weekend.
They are, and that's always been kind of a Thanksgiving tradition.
Yep.
Especially, I'm a Cowboys fan, and so when you take it, that Cowboys play on Thanksgiving Day. A little history behind that. People wonder, well, why in the world does Dallas get to play every Thanksgiving?
It's because they would.
Yeah, exactly. Back in the day when the NFL was just starting to get some television traction, they were experimenting to see if the public would actually watch a pro football game on Thanksgiving.
And of course they are. Everybody's home.
So they solicited the NFL, and the Cowboys raised their hand and said, we're taking it. We'd love to play on Thanksgiving. And for those of you that don't know, that's kind of how the Cowboys became America's team.
Because everybody watched them, whether you liked the team or not.
Exactly.
Because it was what was on TV.
So, and actually, Cowboys play again this Thanksgiving. I did not check the schedule, but I think they've got the Giants.
Oh, that will be a fun game.
We
attended a Giants game for my birthday this year.
We did.
And
you saw the Giants
hate
play.
The Cowboys.
They do hate the Cowboys.
It's rivalry week in the NFL too, it seems like.
It is. And if you go back to a little bit of history, the very first coach of the Dallas Cowboys was Tom Landry, and Tom Landry was a player coach for the New York Giants. So there's a little bit of history between those teams. So anyway, here in the South specifically, what's the big one, Eva?
Auburn, Alabama.
There's
a lot. It's Auburn, Alabama. It's Mississippi and Ole Miss, Texas and Texas A&M. There's Ohio and Michigan.
Yep.
Who else am I missing? Georgia and Georgia
Tech.
Is Florida?
I don't know that Florida has a rivalry game this week. They probably do. I just hadn't looked at the whole schedule.
Yep. But Auburn, Alabama.
Yep, Auburn, Alabama is a big one. Ohio State and Michigan is really a big one.
So my math tutor, this is really funny. My math tutor is from Maryland, I think. Either way, they're big Ohio State fans.
Go Buckeyes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they refuse to say the name Michigan. They just call it the team up north.
The team up north.
And I was wearing a New York hat, a Yankees hat, and they're big Orioles fans. And so I was wearing a New York Yankees hat to tutoring one day. And she said, I'm sorry, I'm going to need you to take that off. I can't teach you while you're wearing that. And so rivalry runs deep up there too.
Yeah, it does. And it runs all across the country. And again, being a lifelong Cowboys fan, I got one on right now. Yep. Got a Cowboys hat with the big blue star. And when I'm in airports and traveling across the country, a lot of times I have a Cowboys hat on, and I'll have a conversation with someone, even whether I've got a Cowboys hat on or not. And they've got a Steelers cap or Green Bay cap, and we have a great conversation. And then I always wait to the end, and I'll be like, hey, I really enjoyed talking to you, but I got to tell you something, bro. We got to do something about your hat selection. And they kind of look at me, and I'm like, I'm a Cowboys fan. And then they start laughing, and we have, we poke fun at each other.
So that's a good way where
good-natured.
Rivalry is good-natured. But in the South particularly, we let it get violent almost and dangerous, and we allow it to become more important than common human decency. I mean, look at the poisoning of the trees in Auburn. After Auburn won that year, the Alabama fan poisoned Toomer's Corner, and all of those trees that had become a tradition to roll after winning of the game died.
Yeah, And let's say this, we're not picking on Alabama fans.
No, we're not. I'm just using that as an example.
Yeah, and I'm glad you did because I had it over here on my sheet. That's a great example of the overall topic when this really what we're talking about, rivalry weekend, it's tribalism. The bigger concept is this term tribalism, and why do we tend to group together? Well, that's part of human nature. If you go back and look at the history of mankind, we have a deep desire to belong. We tend to gather with like-minded people for like-minded purposes. That's where the term tribalism came from. And sometimes today that's become a negative thing, even though you constantly see people go, hey, you got to find your tribe. You know, Mom and I have told you that in high school. You got to find a tribe of people to run with that think like you do. You're getting ready to go off to college. That's going to be one of my first pieces of advice on that. It doesn't have to be a big tribe, but you got to find your people. And that's more along the lines of belonging. People that have some of the same goals, some of the same aspirations, that have the same thought process that you do about life. And that is, number one, it's the human desire to belong. But the concept is tribalism. And where tribalism goes wrong is there should always be a benevolence aspect of tribalism. For instance, hey, you may not be in my tribe, but you're still a member of the human race, and I am going to have a certain degree of benevolence towards you. And the problem comes when our tribe trumps, no pun intended, everything, and then we become elitist, or we get this superiority nature, and we think just because we're a member of this particular tribe, we're superior or we're elite, and that's where it gets dangerous. So,
like some examples of it are like politics, sports teams, what country club you play golf at, like different things like that. There's so many different things. What school you attend. Oh my gosh, that's a big thing here in Birmingham between high schoolers. What school you attend, who you pull for, what sports you play. In the volleyball world, what club you play for. It's so elitist. We set aside human decency in order to have a higher ground on someone, and it's just unfair.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you used politics as an example. I've got a whole list of things that I just wrote down where we kind of become rivals. And so after I wrote all the football teams down, and that includes Army, Navy, by the way, the services have a big rivalry among each other, but we're family. And you have somebody outside the family jump on another service member, hey, we're all going to jump in on behalf of the service, and that's the way it's supposed to work, even though we pick at each other.
It's like the people inside the service can make fun of other branches, but people on the outside can't without everybody ganging up on them.
Exactly. Army and Navy, we're always poking fun at each other. We're poking fun at the Air Force, but hey, if somebody from the outside we're like, hold up.
I know, I see
that's
so
part
many
of the
memes
family.
about Navy, Marines, and Army poking fun at Coast Guard and Air Force. It's kind of funny. My favorite one is they just call the Air Force the Chair Force, and every time I see that, I end up dying laughing.
Yeah, I had to learn that the hard way. When we moved to Montgomery, Alabama, the Army sent me to school for a year with the Air Force, and people just automatically assumed that I was in the Air Force because I was stationed in Montgomery. And so they would come up to me at church and they would go, oh, you're in the service. You're in the Air Force, right? And I'd go, no, I'm in a real service. I'm in the Army. And I figured out that I wasn't making a lot of friends like that because it is a Air Force town. So I had to kind of modify my language a little bit so I could make friends. But we do pick on each other. But again, when you lose the benevolent aspect and you become elite in your tribalism, that's when it's dangerous. And I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Out of my whole list, the most dangerous I saw was the Democratic-Republican deal, because there was a time, and I've lived it, where we talked about bipartisanship, where we could talk about an issue. But here's the big problem with the political parties right now, and I'm talking to both sides, whether you identify as a Republican, whether you identify as a Democrat. Yes, and when your loyalty to your party, so I've said this for years, I've said it since I was a young person your age, when your loyalty to your party supersedes your loyalty to America, you've got a problem. And let me expound on that. You got me going, Eva. Here's the bigger deal. When you think that person, because they're part of that party or they vote that party, is a bad person,
or don't have the same value to life or ownership or things that you have,
that's a dangerous and a slippery slope.
Yep.
And I'm going to use Auburn, Alabama as an example. It is a heated rivalry. And it's fun, but the moment that let's just say if you're an Auburn fan, the moment you think that there's something wrong with them as a person just because they're an Alabama fan, and vice versa, if you're a Bama fan, and you think automatically there's something wrong with a person's character, with their values, with the way they think because they root for a specific team, that is tribalism gone wrong.
Yeah.
And to your point, the poisoning of the oaks, that is tribalism gone wrong.
I see it a lot with Auburn fans. I'm calling them out here, but they'll find out you're...
Oh, everybody's getting called out today.
100%. But they'll find out that you're like an Alabama fan. They're like, how could you? They cheat, or they're a brutal team, or it's unfair that they're winning every year. And that's like a personal indictment on the person for supporting that team. I just don't get behind that. And I'm like, why are you doing this? It's a rivalry. We're both playing college football. Like, they're both playing college football. All they want is your money. Like, at the end of the day, you have no say in what the teams are doing. So why are we letting that be a judgment of people's character?
Precisely. And you do, and you've got to be careful with that. And I'm a moment of transparency. Before we ever became Alabama residents, I had a bad taste in my mouth for Alabama fans. And here's why. And it's unfair, but here's why. After Bear Bryant retired from football, and he died not long after, but Alabama went through a series of coaches en route to eventually finding Nick Saban.
Yep.
But Alabama fans, the university, the state, they were used to Bear Bryant and the program winning and chasing a national championship every year back in the 70s, 80s.
Yeah.
Okay, Bear Bryant, I think his last game was 1983 at the Liberty Bowl. How do I know that? I was there. They beat Illinois, if I remember right, barely. But here's the thing. When they started looking for coaches to replace Bear Bryant, one of the guys that they hired, I don't remember where he was in order, but it was a guy named Bill Curry. Bill Curry played for Alabama. He played for Bear Bryant. I thought Bill Curry was a great football coach. I thought he was an honorable, decent man. And I can't remember how many seasons he lasted. I was a young man. I was in my 20s when this happened. Alabama fired him. They basically ran him off. And I got a real bad taste in my mouth. I'm living in Arkansas at the time, getting ready to go off into the Army. And when Bama fired him, I thought his only quote-unquote sin in life is that he's not Bear Bryant. And that put a bad taste in my mouth toward Alabama fans. Well, now that
they're doing it with Saban too, though.
Yeah. What's his name? Kalen, how you say that? DeBoer. Sorry,
something.
Bama fans. I don't even know how to say your new coach's name. But yeah, I'm like, man, I respect that guy just for taking the job.
Yeah.
I'm like, how in the world, after you saw what happened, if you're older like I am, and you saw what happened to Alabama coaches after Bear Bryant, for a guy to step in and be willing to assume that role of mantleship, leadership, after Nick Saban, I'm like, well, kudos to you, brother. You got some confidence. So, but my point is kind of getting off track, but I had a bad taste toward Alabama fans just for one instance. That's unfair.
Yep.
But we do it all the time. We judge each other. We draw conclusions about people's worth, their character, their values, just because they root for a certain team or they happen to be part of a particular political party.
Actually, I can go even further than that.
Come on with it.
One that is hurting more than just the people themselves is our cancel culture, where specifically the big one right now is whether a company supports Israel or Palestine and the boycotting that's happening. That sales numbers are dropping for companies because maybe they haven't even gone out and said, oh, I support Israel or I support Palestine. They just haven't said anything on it, and they're losing money in places where there are lots of younger generations of people like the West Coast because I get one part of it, not supporting something you don't agree with, but just the widespread hate that comes with because you haven't spoken out about this, you're a terrible person. Like Taylor Swift, right? She had to cancel one of her shows in Vienna because of bomb threats. And fans were so mad at her for not speaking out about it and just going on to her next show. Well, there's an open investigation going on. She probably can't speak out about it. People were like, I'm never going to support her again because she didn't speak out about this. I'm like, why are you hating? Like, it was out of her control, but they're continuing to hate. And then they were hating on fans who were posting about getting to go see her at later shows because, well, why do you get to be happy if I'm not happy because I didn't get to see her and all those things? And it's just a hateful cycle that brings people down, but it also just hurts like economies too.
Yeah, it really does.
That's just a poor example, but that's what I can.
Well, it's
see
one
right
example. And here's the thing, if we're not willing to ask, this is one of the most powerful questions, me as an older person, as a older dad, one of the most powerful questions that I have learned to use in the last several years, and I use it a lot, is, hey, I'm not sure I agree with that, but help me understand why you feel that way.
Yep.
I really want to have a conversation with people. And I find that in this particular culture that we are redefining terms, just like tribalism. We're talking about this general concept of tribalism. Well, before you start a conversation, you might ought to ask someone to define that. We defined pornography last week in last week's episode.
Touring a college, defining alternative lifestyle.
Yeah.
We met a college kid at this tour because we just wanted an honest student opinion on this college outside of the eyes of the tour. And when Mom had asked, are there a lot of students that live an alternative lifestyle? He said, how would you define an alternative lifestyle? He goes, because if you drink tea and I drink coffee, that's an alternative lifestyle, like different things. And he listed on a bunch of different ways it could be and how we had to clear that definition up before he could answer that question. If we just did more of that, maybe there wouldn't be so much hate.
Exactly. And I even told him, hey, man, I appreciate the fact that you clarified the question because obviously we definitely know what we meant and what we're defining when we asked the question. And I think from a broader sense too, not just coffee, tea, which is a great example.
That was just the one I remember him using.
But I think his real point for him was an alternative lifestyle to him is anything that is going against the flow of what the standard behavior is in that particular moment.
Yep.
If everybody's going one direction, but you're going another, well, that could be considered an alternative lifestyle. Now, whether you agree with that, disagree, doesn't really matter. But the point is we had a conversation with him and we were able to clarify what we meant. He was able to clarify what he meant. And then once we had definitions, we were able to have a really, really good conversation.
Yeah, 100%.
I'm reading a book right now, and it uses the same philosophy, and it talks about this term deconstruction. In the Christian church right now, there is a undercurrent, that's what I'm going to call it, of some people that are what's called deconstructing their faith.
Well, I think the reason for that is a lot of people use that term as a way of saying they're leaving the faith slowly rather than just saying they're redefining what their beliefs are. Because a lot of, like children's church, for example, a lot of kids' foundation is just being told this is why we do this and not why we do it. Like, we don't lie to our parents, but we're not told why we don't lie to our parents, things like that. And so I think that's a more proper use of deconstruction rather than just using that as a term to leave the faith.
Yeah, and that's the point of the book that I'm currently reading. The authors say just because somebody uses that term, it does not automatically mean that they are leaving the faith. What it does mean is that they are deconstructing some of the things that they were told and they just accepted as fact. And now that they've grown older, they're realizing that that's not necessarily 100% accurate. And so in conjunction with the deconstruction, there's some reconstruction going on. And the whole point is they're looking for Jesus. They're not necessarily looking for a religion or a religious service. And so there's a lot of differing points brought up in the book. Some I agree with, some I don't. But the point is, I'm reading the book because I like to hear different views. Yep. You've heard me say this before. On Facebook, the posts that I generally take the time to read are the posts from people that I know have a different political viewpoint than I do.
Sure.
Why do I read those? Because I want to understand, okay, I don't agree with you, but why? Help me understand why you are so adamant on that position, and especially if it kind of blurs the line and benevolence is lost toward people of the opposing opinion, and now your post is becoming a little hateful.
Yep.
I want to understand. Help me understand that. The minute it moves into hate and you're judging people's character and their beliefs, this broader topic of tribalism, we got to challenge.
Yep.
Okay.
And like one of the first steps of, so like senior thesis, right? Right. Working on it. I've taken 2 years of logic, 2 years of rhetoric, all of these things. The first thing you do in your paper after you lay out your argument is define all the terms you're going to be using, so there's no confusion throughout your argument, so people know exactly what you mean and how you mean it. And for some people, that could be defining, how they define love in the traditional sense and the untraditional sense. For me, it's defining emotions, it's defining empathy, it's defining social emotional learning, different things like that. But if we don't do that, it just leaves for improper conclusions about topics, and it opens the door for this dangerous tribalism to happen, because people can form an opinion before they even know what you mean and what you're trying to say, because they interpret it one way because they've heard it one way or they have a bad experience with it. So by taking the time to say, I believe this and this is how I'm going to use this definition, how would you use it? Let's come to an agreement on it. How are we going to define these words? In a sense, you can have a lot more open conversations without a bunch of confusion and hate.
I love it.
Because I think people turn confusion into hate in this day. I think they take what they don't understand and they just inherently hate it rather than trying to understand it.
Absolutely. And that's a key phrase, Eva. People tend to be afraid of things they don't understand.
Yep.
And so why not, instead of being fearful of it, why don't we ask some questions, some exploratory questions about whatever it is?
Well,
and here, go ahead.
Going back to that before you move on, one of the quotes my teacher uses a lot is, you can't say you understand something if you don't know how to ask how or why. So you can't say you understand what you're reading if you can't ask how or why and explain why it happened and how it happened. If you can quote it word for word, it can still be in there, but if you have no comprehension of it. And so he challenges us. He says, I don't want you to read the reading just to read it. I want you to be able to, at the end of it, just answer the how and the why, and to be able to ask somebody the how and why and understand whether what they're saying is right or wrong. And so I think a lot of days we're just forgetting that.
Yeah. I think that's a great viewpoint. And as you're saying that, I can remember years and years ago, a young immigrant, and eventually we're going to do an episode on immigration, because that is a very heated topic right now. But I remember a young immigrant that had not been in the country very long at all. He came to me at an event and he said, I don't understand why I should place my hand over my heart when the national anthem is played. I don't understand that. Well, at first it kind of irritated me. And, in the moment, I look back on it, this was years ago. I was probably in my mid-30s and I was on active duty in the Army. And of course, the soldier in me kind of got irritated in the moment. I thought, are you kidding me? You've immigrated to this country and now you're questioning why we place our hand over our heart during the national anthem. And it just in the moment, it just hit me. I thought, number one, kudos to him that he came to me and he trusted me to ask the question. Now I could respond to that out of frustration, just do it because the rest of us do, or I could realize he's asking the question with an open, honest heart, and he doesn't understand. And so I just said, we were outside somewhere, and I said, well, do you have a second for me to answer that? And he said, yes, sir. And I said, sit down on the steps. And so I'll never forget it. We sat down on the steps, and I started explaining to him that our country is not perfect, but when we sing the national anthem, we're singing about values as Americans. The flag represents, it's not just a rag, it's not just a piece of fabric. It represents our country and the best of what we believe about our country, to include liberty, justice, all of those things that are in our documents. And so I explained it to him, and I said, for us as Americans, when we don't stand for the national anthem and we don't place our hand over our heart, that's just a way that we have developed over the years as a sign of respect. And when we don't do those things, when we don't stand, when we don't place our hand over our heart, in reality, for most of us, what we believe about that moment is that we are dishonoring the memory of those that came before. and we're dishonoring their sacrifice, what they did for the country, the country they built, the freedoms that they gave us. And so that's what it means. And I said, I want you to hear this. It's not just about the flag. It's not just about the anthem. It is a show and a sign of respect and honoring those that came before us. And I'll never forget, he kind of looked at me for a minute and he said, I get that. And he said, I understand that. And I said, can you do that? And he said, yes, sir. He said, I can do that. It was a great conversation, and he asked the question, why? Why do we do that?
And so rivalries aren't dangerous in themselves. It's when we stop asking why and we just turn it into blind hatred that it becomes dangerous.
Yeah, so Alabama, Auburn fans, we've been picking on y'all a little bit, but you got to ask yourself, stop it. You got to ask yourself, man, why do I hate that Auburn fan so much? Why do I hate that Alabama fan so much?
Just don't let loyalty is good, but don't let your loyalty to it blind you to the fact that we're all still human. In America, we're all still Americans, things like that. Because if not, we just divide ourselves more. And I feel like, and I've said this before about politics, but you can't complain about the state of the people or the nation if you're an active aggravator of it. And so if you're an active person who has this dislike and this hatred for things you don't understand, but then you complain about it, well, you have no understanding of it. I don't think you should be able to complain about it. And I've said that about politics so many times, but I just think rivalries are good, but when we let them become pure hatred, they're dangerous.
Yeah.
Which is the whole point of this episode.
That's the whole point of this episode. And I was just channel flipping, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, and I saw something where Charles Barkley, who is an Auburn graduate, was interviewing Nick Saban. And I think they were at Bryant-Denny, and they were just sitting up in the empty stands doing this interview. And Barkley asked Saban, tell me about Auburn, and, what do you think about that? And if I just caught it again, I was channel surfing and just was listening. What are they talking about? And Saban said something to the effect. He said, look, Charles, he said, I don't hate Auburn. He said, I love Auburn, matter of fact. He said, when I saw us on the field, he said, I see two great universities that are coming together to play a game. But at the end of the day, we're here to better our state, to better our students, to send them out into their career field, whether it's here in the state of Alabama or whether it's somewhere across the country. But we're producing good citizens that came from Alabama, talking about the state of Alabama. And I don't hate one university versus the other. And I thought that was so insightful. Hey, we're at the end of the day, whatever happens, we're all Alabamians. And I know, hey, I'm going to call you out on this one. I got problems when a Bama fan won't cheer for an Auburn team that's playing for a national title, and vice versa. I got problems with an Auburn fan that won't cheer for an Alabama. Come on, we're all from Alabama. So, but hey, some people don't see it that way. If you can't root for the other team, don't be hateful about it. That's our point. Just be quiet.
So, in other words, this is just a very silly, not the most serious episode, but it was just something fun we could talk about before Thanksgiving. That was lighthearted and it requires a ton of preparation, but I'm excited for this break and I'm excited to see who wins the Iron Bowl.
Yeah, and speaking of Thanksgiving, we could go into a totally different episode about what we're grateful for. But from us to you, whatever your family's doing this particular holiday season, we wish you the very best. For those of you that listen to us on a regular basis or just checking us out, thank you for being along on the ride, and we speak God's blessing, favor, protection over you and your family. May your hearts be full this Thanksgiving season, and may your bellies be also full, but not quite as full. I looked at the scales this morning, Eva. Oh my goodness, I got a little bit of work to do this week so I can open up a little bit of space. The holiday season
is the worst time to try and start a diet.
It is, but you gotta stay on top of it. It's like everything else. You gotta what does not get measured does not get managed properly. So I measure every day, and it was kind of ugly this morning. I'm like, yep, you ate a little bit too much this weekend. So enough on that. Hey, we hope you all have a great Thanksgiving, and that you create your own family memories with friends, and that it's just a productive time for you. And it's a time to just be grateful for those that have come before, for those that have sown into our lives, that have given so much to us. I think about all the folks that are around the table over the years, and a lot of them are not here anymore. But we've got the memories, we've got the values that they instilled in us, and that's a big part of Thanksgiving, is to just be gracious, be full of gratitude, and be thankful that we have what we have. And so before
our final thing, thank you to everyone who listens, because we're so grateful for y'all, because this message means nothing if no one hears it. And so thank y'all to everybody who listens.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for being along for the ride. So regardless of what happens,
let's always be able to talk from generation to generation. Hey, if you enjoyed our episode, make sure to follow us wherever you listen to podcasts and leave a review, because it helps people who don't know about us hear our message. And if you want to follow us on our socials, follow us at G2G_podcast on Instagram and Generation to Generation on Facebook.